Hello and welcome to the walkthrough for Night of the Sun, a 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons module. My name is the Mad Hermit, and I'm going to be your guide through these podcasts. Basically, these are overviews, going to go over the details of the module step by step, hopefully give some advice and make it a little easier for anybody running it. This podcast is mainly intended for game masters, of course, dungeon masters who will be running the module. So if you're a player, you should be warned. This particular podcast is just going to be an overview of the module and sort of some pre-session stuff that the GM may need to take into account. But if you're a player, you probably don't want to listen through any of the rest of the walkthroughs because it's going to give up all the juice. Spoilers. If you don't want them, avoid them. So having the PDF or the module with you at the time that I'm going over all these things, I don't know if that will help or not. Probably the best way to use the module or PDF, the book or PDF I should say, would be to read through the sections before you listen to the podcast maybe. Then by the time you come to my overview of it, you'll pretty much know what I'm talking about. Hopefully I'll cover everything that's in the book and module. I might occasionally miss something. I will try not to. I may occasionally even add things in. I most definitely am going to add things, especially when I talk about variations on some of the scenes or some of the same details that are going on, things you can change up. Most DMs change the modules around to fit their own needs, so fully expect that. I won't be able to help you there much, but I will try to give you some notes on where you might be able to make some adjustments as we're going along. So in these podcasts, I'm going to try to stick pretty close to the module. I'm going to detail out the course of it, and I wanted to go ahead and make sure that we discuss some things about the book. Now, there's differences between the module and the PDF. They're not major, but they are differences, and I'll cover them in the podcast when we come to them. The book has a few things in it that the PDF won't have, the PDF version won't have. There's some changes in things like NPCs and items. So the book has a different set of NPCs that might help the PCs along in the course of the adventure if they need henchmen or hirelings, or you want to strengthen their party a little bit. The PDF has a different set of those things, and then there's items throughout the course of the adventure that are also different depending on whether you have the PDF or the book. We did that just so that there's a little bit of different value in each of those things. And it's the items that we changed around aren't significant enough to make much of a difference. It's just a little bit here and there. Mainly, the book is going to be more like the, I don't know if you'd call it an R rating, but a hard PG rating, whereas the PDF versions, in order to be able to sell them on RPGNet and Dungeon Masters Guild, some of the things that are in the book needed to be taken out of the PDF. So those are the main differences, and I'll point out when those happen to come up. So if you already have the book, you know that it's a whopping 130-some pages, maybe just like 130. I don't know. It's big. Either way, the PDF and the book are big. And I know that the going trend in module writing these days is for smaller and smaller and more concise. God help me. I try to write like that, and I just can't do it. I over-describe everything. I put in a lot more detail probably than ever you would need. So know when you're looking at that big chunk of a module that you don't necessarily have to read it all verbatim and remember every little last detail. I just put in a lot of information there. If there's anything you really want to remember, highlight it. It's the kind of thing that, I don't know, I try to write it smaller. I really do. I try. It's just difficult for me. I just end up writing it the way I write it. It's a lot of detail. You may not need everything that's there, but hopefully you'll find some of it useful at least, and you can use some of what I put in there to kind of adjust and warp around to suit your needs. The point of the podcast is to really alleviate the weight of the amount of reading you may or may not have to do while running this module. If I do my job right in the podcast, it should definitely mitigate the heavy lifting on the reading side of things. But just remember, you don't have to remember everything. You don't need every last detail. You just need the gist, and then you do what you do. That's what we all do as DMs. We kind of get the idea, and then we go from there. And hopefully by the time all is said and done and the dice are finished spinning, we're still on track with our story. Another difference I want to make sure that I mention in the books and PDF is artwork. We went to great pains to shift out and create different art for the PDF than the book. Mainly, we want them both to be individual, and we want the book to maintain a little bit of collector's value. That book's only available from Kickstarter, so pretty much the only way you could have gotten it. I think we've debated whether or not we should put it on print on demand, maybe on Amazon, and we might at some point. But even if we do that, we will again adjust the book so that the Kickstarter book itself, that's the only way to get that particular printing of this module in that form. We want that to be unique, and we want it to be special to the people that backed us on Kickstarter. And we're going to do that with every book in this series, just to make sure that the one that you get from the Kickstarter backing is not exactly replicated again in any actual form that's available to other people. You get it on the Kickstarter, you're going to get a one-of-a-kind version that's going to have a pretty small print run. Finally, and by way of closing out this introduction to the podcast, I wanted to take a minute to apologize up front for any of the typos that you may or may not find in the book or the PDF. Of course, like anyone, we scour and look for those all the time, but I mean, they just slip past after you've read something 60 times. You tend not to notice them, I guess. Want to apologize for those up front. If I find any that seem to stumble any subject that they're found within, or any topic, I will definitely point them out and clarify them for you. Hopefully there shouldn't be enough that becomes an issue, but you never know. I've had that happen before. I just want to make sure that any out the gate, I'm going to try to approach those if they are the kind that could stumble you in any way. I'm going to try to fix that for you here in the podcast too. So, all right, from here on out, I guess we are going to take a look at what I guess you need to prep for your game, and what you're going to need for a session 0. So the first thing that the GM's going to want to try to figure out before running through this module is going to be what angle they want to come at it from. I suppose you could run it from a neutral perspective, but the two funner perspectives for running this would be from your traditional sort of heroic, good-based character, good alignments, if you're one of those archaic few still using alignments, and I am. So we have that embedded in here. Or whether you want to run it from the evil side of the coin. Either way is going to be actually pretty fun. Sometimes the evil thing seems more novel just because it's a little bit rarer. It's not entirely rare, but it's a little bit rare. And some GMs kind of stave away from that sort of thing just because it can be tricky to run evil campaign. Sometimes players get a little confused as to how to go about running evil characters. In this particular module, it shouldn't be too much of an issue, however. If you decide to run this from the evil side of the coin, your player characters, they're going to be Cultists of Orcus. So they're worshippers of the demon lord Orcus, and they're from a faction. You're going to, depending on what campaign world you use, you're going to place them in a city probably a few weeks away from wherever you've placed the sort of the center for the module to take place. The module story is going to start out in a little village called Dawn's Hollow, which needs to be in a hilly region, sort of south of some mountains and west of a forest or east of a forest, something like that. About a week away from the mountains, about a week away from the forest, and a few weeks away from whatever starting point you decide to give it. If they're from, I don't know, they're from Kalimshan or something, some city to the southeast of where you begin your story, the characters themselves will be members of the Cult of Orcus, and until this adventure began, they may not have really known one another. They all lived in the city, they all participated in the cult, each one belonged to a different chapter of the cult within the city. But since they're kind of newbies to the whole deal, they haven't really been able to meet face-to-face with any of the leaders. Every major sort of ritual or interaction they've had with other main members of the cult would have been in disguise to this point. So even with one another. As a matter of fact, the first time they probably got a good look at each other is when they left Kalimshan to head on up toward the village of Dawn's Hollow. They may have had to take ships to a coast to get into the general region of Dawn's Hollow, and then traveled from there, either by foot or maybe with a trader caravan north until they could split off from them and move toward the village itself. As evil characters, they're not necessarily presenting themselves as evil. They're not going to be wandering around, rubbing their paws together and giggling over whatever evil they can devise and have happen. They're in disguise. They've been sent undercover into the course of this adventure to try to figure out what a rival faction of the Cult of Orcus is up to in Dawn's Hollow. That hook for the evil side, there's a little section, an appendix number 4 at the back of the module, covers most of the specifics for your evil characters if you choose to run this way. So yes, they're evil. Yes, that's going to change how they look at things and what they end up doing in the course of the adventure, but they are ostensibly posing as good people, or at least normal people, as adventurers, something like that. So the evil aspects of running the evil campaign, those are going to be kind of on the down low, and the characters from that are evil are trying not to seem overtly evil. That's the catch of this, and that's what's going to make it kind of interesting. It's your players are running characters that are themselves evil, but they're acting like they're not, or trying to act like they're not to stay hidden so that they can accomplish what their actual goal is. So it'll be that flip back and forth between what they're presenting as and what they truly are that's going to be pretty interesting, at least for the GM, because he's going to have to be looking for cracks in the facade. And some of the NPCs they deal with, they might spot those cracks and exploit them or use them against the party. So the party's going to have to be careful, whereas on their own, they're going to have to, their evil can shine out a little more. And how it is that they go about dealing with the people they interact with, how they lie to them, how they use the information they gain from them, all of that is where the evil side of this is going to shine out when it does. With a more traditional or heroic-based group of characters, a goodly group of characters, none of those intricacies are really going to be all that necessary. They can just be themselves, of course, come across as they would in any adventure, and that will work just fine. The main difference between the good and the evil parties are going to be how they come about entering into the course of the adventure and what it is they kind of know about what's going on from the beginning. The evil group, an evil group of players, or not players, evil group of characters is going to have a little bit more grounding in what's happening near Dawn's Hollow because they're expecting something to be happening near Dawn's Hollow. That's why they've been sent out there to see what it is that this rival faction of the Cult of Orcus is up to. The good parties, they're going to be starting without that basis. They're going to have to kind of try to piece things together as they go along. They're going to be encountering the events and kind of left in more of a state of mystery as to what's happening, and more slowly but surely figure out what exactly is going on, where the villain is, and how to defeat him. So that split between the good party and the evil party, that is the main decision that the GM needs to make before running this adventure. You need to decide which side of the coin you want your characters to approach the adventure from. That's going to alter quite a bit for them. If you decide to go with the evil group, you're going to need to do just a little bit more work in the backstories of the characters. You're going to need to give them a backstory as to why the hell they would be involved in the Cult of Orcus at all, what went wrong in the course of their lives that involved them in that mess, and why it is that they want to fulfill this. I mean, if they do what they've been sent to do and accomplish the task of undermining this rival cult this rival faction of the Cult of Orcus, they will be able to become full members of the Cult of Orcus back in their home city. That comes with more perks, just more power, that sort of thing. So if they're serious about being Cultists of Orcus, it's a good deal. If they're not Cultists of Orcus, if you don't go with the evil side, then your adventuring party has more options as to how you get them started here, and their backstory isn't quite as important. You can either have a group of low-level characters that maybe you already have involved in a campaign, and you can just sort of bring them into this as a side adventure that's on the course of some other adventure they're already involved in. And then we provide some hooks, and I'll discuss those a little bit more later. But I just wanted to make it pretty clear that your first main decision is which side you want to approach it from, good or evil. Once you get that down, read through the section on evil if you're going that way. And if not, don't worry about it so much. You can start this pretty easily if you're just going to go with a heroic-based character group. If you do the evil one, you need to do just a touch more work in the background. Also, on the off chance that you want to continue the campaign with these characters after this adventure, we're developing a campaign navigator that can help you come up with adventures and run a campaign in the period of time that takes place after the close of this adventure to the beginning of the second one in the series, which is called Bleeding Light. We are slated to have Bleeding Light out sometime in the fall of 2021, and it looks like we're on so far we're on target for that. I'm not going to make any promises because I know how these things go. We could end up undershooting or overshooting that. The campaign navigator, that is almost completely done, and we will have that up within the next couple of months. Now, that's either going to be on our own website or I don't know. We will figure out a way to make it obvious where you can get that. It'll be a PDF. It won't be printed, at least not in the beginning, and probably will be at the typical places. The places you go to get your PDFs. So I'd like to move on to a little bit of discussion about game systems. The module in both the PDF and the book form has been detailed for use with 5e, at least to some degree. I mean, like any module, the DM, I should say, is going to be able to change just about anything they need to in the course of those. But the basis of it is for 5e, Dungeons and Dragons. You could pretty easily slide this into any other version of Dungeons and Dragons clone. OSR games would be perfect for this. You can very easily convert this to any OSR setting or role-playing game system, and I think it will work just perfectly for that. I mentioned Fate in the book. I think that's a pretty good game system just because it's a very easy game system to learn. The systematics aren't going to convert right across to Fate. You would have to read through the module and decide where and what you would want to do in terms of Fate's game system. But that's an easy one. I just think it's easy to convert any module to Fate if you like that type of role-playing game. Some people do. My personal favorite is Rollmaster. I know that is an ancient term these days and probably not something that many people even think about, but hey, if you get a wild hair, you might want to consider taking a look at that game. I wouldn't go with the later versions of it. I think Harp is like the latest version of it, and that's not a very good game system. It's the early versions. Probably the second version of Rollmaster, I think, is about the top of the scale. There's a lot of charts, very heavy character info in the beginning. It takes a while to make a character for Rollmaster. I like that, though. Your characters are very intricate. You know a lot about them by the time you're done. It's a good game system. I'm going to go ahead and just I'm going to fly its flag here for a second and let you know, if you haven't tried it, it's a hell of a lot of fun. There are a lot of charts involved. A lot of weird dice rolling goes on in that game, but man, is it a good game system. I mean, a highly, highly detailed game system. Like most things, the trend in role-playing games currently, as of 2021, is for, simplicity and kind of ease of play. I get that. Not everybody has the time to devote to learn new game systems, let alone highly complex ones. But, man, if you really like role-playing games, if it's like your bread and butter, if it's your deal, and you want one that can really sing, Rollmaster is worth a look. That is a serious game system from back in the day. Nothing else quite like it out there. I was also a big fan of Traveler, but I don't think you can convert this fantasy game to Traveler. Maybe. They have a great character generation system in there. That's completely aside the point. Other things I would mention using is I am a fan of the 5e hardcore mode by Runehammer Games. I like that thing. It really makes makes your battles a little more brutal. I prefer that. I am not a fan of the save until you don't die rules that are involved, like all these heavy safety nets that are in 5e. Those bug me. That's just me. You may love them. For me, they're a pain in the ass. I've talked to other GMs who were like, it makes no difference. I can walk right around those. And maybe you can. I can't. They're really annoying. I just go ahead and house rule those right the heck out of the game right at the beginning. If you die, you die. I like the old second edition -10 equals permadeath sort of situation. I don't know how you do it, but that's what I would move toward. And if you want a little bit more brutal version of this game, I definitely recommend to look at Runehammer's 5e hardcore mode. That's going to work pretty good for you here. One way or another, you're probably going to end up wanting to use Minion rules. That's a little more in depth than I want to try to explain here in the podcast, but it's basically just reducing the hit points of a lot of critters to a manageable level where in a kind of heated battle situation, your players can be knocking them out a little bit quicker, make it more of a cinematic sort of battle situations. Minion rules probably going to serve you in the dungeon portions of this adventure and maybe during undead incursions within the village itself. Also, I really don't want to forget to mention that one of the things you may consider adjusting your 5e characters with in the course of this module is I give a lot of checks for Sanity. Now, generally you can swap Sanity or you can swap Wisdom with Sanity. So wherever I put a Sanity check in, I think I also, I do like a Sanity/Wisdom check or Sanity/Wisdom save. Excuse me, dying of COVID over here. I hope not. And I like that as a character stat. It comes in handy. Maybe it's just from playing Call of Cthulhu that I have such a love for the idea of sanity. But one thing that D&D never really includes very much are fear states or sort of emotional states for your characters, and sanity is like gives you sort of a lever on that type of impact for your character. So you're able to tell how put together your character's mind is, whether or not they're going to be able to stand and deal with the presence of a lot of undead or really strange things happening in their surroundings. It's detailed as one of the advanced rules or one of the optional rules in the DM's guide for 5e. I would take a look at that and consider giving your characters a sanity score in addition to their other stat scores. I would do that anyway, but like for any module, this one, it will help a little bit, and we do play to it quite a bit in the course of the module. So if you want to experiment with it, at least this module is a good place to do that. Probably the last thing that you would want to consider in terms of a session 0 is going to be the levels of your characters when they come into this adventure. We detail the module as being for 2nd to 4th level characters, but like with any module, that's even the phrasing of it, like this is specifically for this level of characters, is that's kind of a term of art. Yes and no. It is, but in terms of the kind of encounters and monster presences that they're going to face in this, it's a little hefty. So right out of the bat, I want to tell you that you're going to want to err on the side of either being prepared to pull back some of the encounters that your characters may face, or being prepared to up their levels just a little bit. It's going to come down more than anything probably to how many players you have in your game. If you have a game with, say, just 2 players, you're probably going to want those players to be playing characters that are 5th level. I would say 5th or 6th. The trouble with that is that a 5th and 6th level character, they probably can walk through many of the threats that they're going to face in this module pretty easily. However, they're going to end up facing, in the end, if it comes down to where if they can reach the main villain and fight him and his henchmen, they're going to be outweighed there if there's only 2 of them. Your better bet is to have a few more players, so probably a party size of about 4 to 5 is going to be ideal for this module, and character levels somewhere in the 3 to 4 level that's probably pretty good. If you have 6 players, second level characters will probably be okay. However, some of the threats they're going to face, they might drop pretty quick in some courses of the later stages of the adventure, especially. We've taken pains to kind of add in little resting points or little, safe places even within the dungeon, so that people can escape back to sort of healing rooms and things, places where that they can pull back out of the main fray and hopefully repair themselves enough that they can go back into it and finish things out. But the players are gonna have to be smart in the dungeons, or else they might just get axed. That's the way it is in Dungeons and Dragons, though, and so whenever you're writing a module and it's going to be presented to a lot of different people and a lot of different DMs running it, I know I can balance those threats for any level of character that I have involved in the story, and most DMs can. You're going to have to play to that instinct in yourself as a DM. It's good that you're going to want to read through the sections of the module, but before the player characters actually interact with those, so you can get a taste of what they're dealing with, and you can start to sort of balance that schematic out pretty well. 2 to 4 is the right character level spread, but how low or high you go on that scale really depends on how many players you have. If you just have a couple of players, they're going to need more levels, or at least a lot more NPCs. Maybe even secondary characters they can fall back to if their main character dies. If you have more players, 6, 7 players, something like that, some unwieldy amount of players, then you can have a few more of them be lower level and get away with it in this particular case, because they just have a broader range of what they can do, and they can get off more attacks and around. It's combat situations that are going to get tricky. There's some undead incursions that can happen in the beginning of the story, and then there's a lot of undead in the dungeons, and the idea there is to have it so that your player characters get chased around those dungeons a little bit, but they get cornered or something, it can end for them pretty quickly if they don't have enough options for facing off those foes. All right, I wanted to talk a little bit about where you might think of placing this in terms of campaign settings, placing the story, that is. Kind of depends on the setting you're using. If you're using your own homebrew campaign setting, which I kind of hope you are, all you're looking for is a place that will be a hilly region west of a forest by about a week, a few weeks south of a mountain range where some orcs could have come out of, and at least a couple of weeks from any other major center. The village of Dawn's Hollow should be slightly isolated, kind of off on its own. It shouldn't feel any real weight of a kingdom presence or, patrols, anything like that. If you're using the Forgotten Realms setting, I'm no expert in the Forgotten Realms, but I have picked out a few places that might work well for this. If you are an expert at Forgotten Realms, you are going to know better than me, but here's some places I would look at that might fit the bill. If I was west of the Anarok Desert, then I think I might consider placing it south or southwest of Everesca. You might have to flip where the forest for the Wood Elves is, but I think there's some down there. You might also consider going say 100 miles or 150 miles northeast of Sundabar. That's kind of an isolated place that might fit the bill. Again, an expert in the Forgotten Realms is going to know this way better than I am, but that would be a good guess. That's where I would place it, regardless of what's actually going on there in that setting. I would just make it fit. Probably a lot of you would do that too. If I was east of the Anarok Desert, then I guess I might consider somewhere near the Tortured Lands. I would have to know more about what the hell the Tortured Lands were, I guess, which I do not know. Otherwise, I might go south of the Galena Mountains in the Heliogabulus region. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. It looks like it might fit the bill, though, for what you need for a kind of isolated village.
Otherwise, I might go west of, say, the Earthfast Mountains. Obviously, that's just east of the Dragon Reach, so I'm not sure how well-traveled that region is, but I think it's a little more isolated. My maps of that region aren't close enough for me to make out like any roads or villages in the area that might already exist there. If I just went from the maps I have, I would plop it there and say that that's where it was. Let's see, Greyhawk. There's a lot of good options for Greyhawk. I guess might go to the eastern side of the main map for Greyhawk into the Flinty Hills. It's near the prelacy of Almore. That might work. There's also the Little Hills region near Longspear. I think that's a town or a small city. It's in the Yeomanry, which is near the Barrier Peaks, I think. And then there's also the Tusman Hills, which are west of Ket, K-E-T, Ket. And I would use the southern stretch of those hills. It's kind of on the north side of the Barrier Peaks again. In that case, you might want to just switch things around so that the orcs told about in the story, the orc horde that sweeps down toward the village of Dawn's Hollow, actually, you could have them come out of those southern mountains instead out of the Barrier Peaks, and that might fit a little better. But you got a mountain range on either side of those hills there, of the Tusman Hills, so you could use either direction in that case. One last consideration to put into play for your game would be the deity that's most involved with this. So we use a solar deity. We just keep calling it the sun god. Basically, that's what we refer to it throughout the module as. The Order of the Sun, meaning the knights that serve this sun god. So if you use a setting that already has a main solar deity or one that would work for a lawful good Order of Paladins, that's the one you're going to want to use. And Forgotten Realms, I would guess that would be Lathander. I think most people would agree with me on that one, but there's a few other options. You could, somebody that's really fluent with the Forgotten Realms would be able to juggle that around and get one that maybe fits even better for a militant order of knights. I'm not sure what knighthood or order you might want to assign that in Greyhawk. I think Pelor would probably be the god, if I'm remembering correctly. That's a solar deity, if I'm thinking correctly. Otherwise, I'm giving you completely false information. If you're a Greyhawk expert, please forgive me. But find a solar deity that will work for the sun god and just flip that in there. If you're using your own campaign world, then obviously we're all more adroit with our own campaign worlds. You'll know which solar deity would fit better, and you'll just want to replace that idea of the sun god with whichever deity fits your setting better for the major solar deity in a lawful good sense. All right, well, I think that just about wraps up all the kind of preliminary stuff that we need to cover. Probably forgotten some stuff here. I am new to this, so I'm going to ask for your forgiveness in any mess-ups I may have made along the way here, but I'm going to keep plowing ahead. The next section is going to go over how we want to open our adventure and hopefully get into Chapter 1 of it. So I will see you in the next session.
Hey everyone, Ashiel here, and if you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, you can visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/MadHermitGames. In addition to our free walkthrough podcasts, we will be offering subscriptions which will include new dungeons, storylines, NPCs, as well as other exclusive content on a monthly basis. We look forward to hearing from you, so please consider joining our Discord channel, Mad Hermit Games, where you can connect with us, other DMs, and players. You can also email us at madhermitgames@mail.com, and all the links will be in the description. Thanks for listening.